I accidentally received a parcel addressed to my wife, and it made me suspicious. That's where this nightmare began. To give you some background, I'm Jason, 34 years old, and I've been married to Nicole for 6 years. We have no kids, which always felt like a choice we both made together. We've had a great marriage, or at least, I thought we had. Our life was comfortable. I worked hard at a tech job, and Nicole worked as a freelance graphic designer from home. Things were stable. We didn't fight much, and we both seemed content. That's why it hit me so hard when I found out the truth. It all started when I came home from work one day to find a package sitting on our porch. It was small, wrapped in plain brown paper, and had my wife's name on it. Normally, Nicole would handle these things, but I just picked it up and brought it inside. I was a little confused because Nicole had mentioned nothing about expecting a package. When I got inside, I set the box down on the kitchen counter. Nicole wasn't home yet, so I decided to open it. I wasn't expecting anything serious, just maybe some small orders she had placed for work. But when I opened the package, I froze. Inside was a bottle of perfume, a fancy one, from a brand I recognized as being very high-end. But the thing that caught my eye was the note that came with it. It wasn't signed, but the message was clear: "I can't wait to see you tonight, I've been thinking about you all day." I sat there, holding the note, trying to wrap my head around what I was reading. I know it wasn't addressed to me. And I certainly didn't remember buying that perfume for her. I put the note down and immediately started looking for more clues. My heart was racing, and I could feel the blood draining from my face. I knew something wasn't right. Nicole walked in about 20 minutes later, smiling as usual, completely unaware of what I had just uncovered. She kissed me on the cheek, asking how my day was. But all I could think about was the perfume and that note. "Hey, you expecting any packages?" I asked casually, trying to act normal, but my voice was trembling. She looked confused for a second, then shook her head. "No, I didn't order anything." "Why?" I picked up the perfume bottle and handed it to her. "This came for you today." Her face went white. I watched as her eyes flicked nervously to the bottle, then back to me. She grabbed it quickly, almost defensively, and shoved it into the drawer near the counter, out of sight. But it was too late. I had already seen enough. "What is this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady but failing. "Why didn't you tell me you ordered perfume?" Nicole seemed to hesitate, her lips trembling. "It's just a gift from a friend. A client I've worked with for a while. Nothing to worry about." "A gift from a friend?" The words hung in the air, but I knew something wasn't adding up. I could feel my anger building, and it was hard to keep my cool. "You're lying, Nicole," I said, my voice quieter but sharper. "Who gave you this? You didn't mention any friend. And that note." Nicole's face crumpled, and for the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words didn't come. She just stood there, looking at me like a deer caught in headlights. I could feel my stomach churning. My heart pounded in my chest, and I felt a mixture of confusion, anger, and betrayal. My mind raced, trying to piece everything together, but the one thing I knew was that I wasn't being told the truth. And that made me furious. "I need to know the truth," I said, my voice more forceful now. "Don't lie to me anymore. Who is this friend?" Nicole started to cry then. I had never seen her like this, shaking, her hands covering her face, her voice cracking with each word. "I'm so sorry, Jason. I didn't want you to find out like this." My stomach dropped. My hands clenched into fists, and I stepped back, trying to process her words. "Find out? Find out what, Nicole? What the hell is going on?" She couldn't look at me. She couldn't even speak. The silence stretched between us, suffocating, until she finally said it. "I've been seeing someone else. For the past few months. His name is Mark. He's a client, but it turned into more. I'm so sorry." I felt like the world was crumbling around me. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I wanted to scream, to punch something, to make the pain go away. But instead, I just stood there, numb, staring at her, trying to process the fact that the woman I trusted, the woman I loved, had been lying to me for months. She had been cheating on me. And I had no idea. I didn't say anything for a long time. I just turned and walked out of the kitchen, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know where I was going or what I was doing. I needed space. I needed to figure out what the hell was happening. And most of all, I needed to understand why. Why had she done this? I didn't sleep that night. I spent hours pacing around the house, thinking about everything. The signs I missed. The times she had acted differently. The little things that didn't add up. I was angry, confused, betrayed. And I knew one thing for sure, I couldn't just let this go. I needed answers. I needed to understand the full extent of the betrayal. The next morning, I made a decision. I was going to confront her again, but this time, I wasn't going to be calm. I was going to get the full truth. I was going to dig deeper. And once I had all the answers, I was going to make her feel the consequences of what she had done. I wasn't sure what form that would take yet, but I was sure of one thing, I wasn't going to be the one left in the dark anymore. The days following my discovery were a blur of anger and confusion. I had spent the better part of the last 48 hours just trying to digest everything. Nicole's confession was still raw in my mind, and my emotions were all over the place. I felt betrayed, hurt, and honestly, a little bit stupid. How had I not seen the signs? How had I missed everything? I knew one thing for sure, I wasn't just going to walk away from this. I wasn't going to sit back and let her go on with her life like nothing had happened. I needed to make her feel what I was feeling. And for that, I needed a plan. I'd spent so many years trying to make our relationship work, making sacrifices for her, thinking that we had something special. Now that everything had shattered, I wanted revenge, not just to make her regret what she did, but to make sure she understood the cost of betraying me. But I wasn't going to do anything reckless or destructive. I wasn't going to ruin myself in the process. I had seen enough drama in the movies. This was real life, and I needed to be strategic. I needed to make a statement, one that would shake her to her core. That's when I decided to talk to someone. I wasn't about to try to figure this out alone. I reached out to my sister-in-law, Rachel. She and I had always gotten along, and I knew she was one of the few people I could trust in this situation. Maybe she could help me think through this. I called her that afternoon, my voice strained with emotions. "Rachel, I need to talk to you. It's about Nicole." She didn't hesitate. "What's going on? You sound like you've been through hell." I explained everything to her. How I found the perfume, the note, and how Nicole had admitted to cheating with a guy named Mark. I told her about the way Nicole had broken down, how I felt like I had been completely blindsided. "God, Jason, I'm so sorry," Rachel said, her voice filled with sympathy. "But I'm glad you're talking to me about this. You're not alone in this, okay? I'll help however I can." That was a relief. Rachel's support gave me the strength I needed to think more clearly. As I kept talking to her, something shifted in me. I realized that I didn't want to just destroy Nicole, I wanted to show her what it meant to lose me, but not in a way that would make me feel like I was spiraling out of control. I didn't want to get lost in anger. I needed to regain control of my life, and I needed a plan that would allow me to do that. Rachel and I began to brainstorm, and she suggested something that caught my attention. "Why don't you channel some of this anger into something creative? You've always been good at building things, right? Why not take up your woodworking again? Maybe make something that represents your strength, something that shows you're moving forward, no matter what she's done. I had forgotten about woodworking. I used to love it, building custom furniture, taking raw wood and turning it into something beautiful. But over the years, I had let that hobby slip away, prioritizing work and family instead. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. It wasn't just about physical objects, it was about me putting my emotions into something productive, something that gave me back my power. I told Rachel about the idea, and she was all in. Yes. You can even make something for yourself. Maybe a chair or a table. Something that's all about you, Jason. Show her you're stronger than she could ever imagine. That weekend, I got to work. I went to the local hardware store, bought some wood, and set up my workshop in the garage. The smell of fresh wood, the feel of the tools in my hands, it felt like I was taking control of my life again. I poured my frustration, hurt, and anger into the project, cutting and sanding, focusing on every detail. I wasn't just building furniture, I was building myself back up. And with every stroke of the tool, I felt more and more in control. I wasn't going to let Nicole's betrayal define me. I was going to define myself, and this was the first step in that process. But even as I worked, the plan for revenge was taking shape in my mind. The piece of furniture I was making would be a symbol of my strength, of my ability to move on. But I wasn't going to stop there. I needed more. I needed her to feel the full impact of what she'd done. I had a few ideas in mind, each more subtle than the last. The goal wasn't just to punish her, it was to make her regret ever taking me for granted. The first step was easy, I was going to stop letting her have any control over me. I was going to pull back emotionally and stop tolerating her lies. That alone would send a message. But I wasn't done yet. Rachel called me again a few days later, and I could hear the urgency in her voice. "Jason, I've been thinking," she said. "What if you do something that really gets her attention? Like, something that hits her where it hurts. Something that makes her realize you're serious about moving on." "Like what?" I asked, setting down my tools. "I've been talking to a friend of mine who went through a similar situation. She said she started taking ownership of everything, her space, her life, her happiness, and started showing her ex exactly what it meant to be left behind. It's not about revenge for the sake of revenge. It's about making her see you're fine without her." I thought about this for a moment. The idea of showing Nicole that I didn't need her to be happy was powerful. I wasn't just doing it for her. I was doing it for me. But what could I do that would really make her see that? That's when it hit me. I had been so focused on making something physical, a piece of furniture that represented my strength, that I hadn't thought about making a bigger statement. I had to start living as if she no longer existed in my life. I had to take what was mine and make it something entirely new. This wasn't just about woodworking. It was about taking control of everything I had let her take for granted. This was only the beginning. And I was ready to see where this journey would take me. The following weeks were a blur of focus, work, and subtle shifts in my life. I poured myself into my woodworking. Each piece I crafted, each stroke of the sander, felt like it was pushing me further away from the pain that Nicole had caused. But the revenge plan, the thing that would make her feel the weight of her choices, was still taking shape in my mind. Rachel was right, I needed to show Nicole that I was moving on, but not just moving on in the usual sense. I wasn't just going to be okay, I was going to be better, better than I was when she had me. She had taken me for granted, and I wanted her to feel that loss deeply. After a few weeks of building a new table, I started to get an idea of how I would execute the next step. I had planned to take ownership of everything I had neglected while I was in that relationship, my hobbies, my freedom, my space, and make it crystal clear to her that I no longer needed her. But there was more. I wanted her to see what she had thrown away, to make her realize that she would never get me back. I had to do something that would hit her on a personal level, something that would haunt her in the way that her betrayal haunted me. And so, I decided to make a very deliberate move. Step 1, the withdrawal. I stopped being emotionally available to Nicole. Completely. When she came home, I didn't talk to her about my day, didn't make small talk. I stopped engaging in conversations about our relationship, and I started taking care of my own needs. I would go to the gym, take long walks, and make plans with friends without telling her. If she asked where I was going, I simply told her, "It's none of your business anymore." She didn't know how to handle this. The Nicole I knew was used to me being predictable and easy to manage. But this new version of me was a mystery, and I could see it eating away at her. She would ask, in a soft voice, "Jason, we need to talk," but I refused. When she tried to initiate a conversation about the affair, I cut her off with a simple, "We don't need to talk. You've said everything." It wasn't about being cruel, it was about reclaiming my space. I wanted her to realize that I no longer needed her approval, her affection, or her presence in my life. Every time she looked at me with those sad, apologetic eyes, I reminded myself that I was doing this for me. I was free. Step 2, the social media post. It was time for the next step in my plan. One evening, after a few drinks with Rachel, I decided to make the most public statement I could. I posted something on social media, something simple but direct. Moving on isn't just about leaving someone behind. It's about rediscovering who you are when you're no longer defined by someone else. I included a picture of myself in the workshop, proudly showing off the table I had spent the last month working on. I didn't tag Nicole or mention her in any way, but I knew she would see it. I knew she would know exactly what it meant. It wasn't just a picture of some furniture I had made, it was a message. A message that I was taking control of my life again, and that she would no longer be part of it. When I saw her glance at the post later that evening, I could see the confusion and hurt in her eyes. It was exactly what I wanted. I wasn't playing the victim anymore. I was moving on, and I wanted her to feel that loss in a way she couldn't ignore. Step 3, the final letter. At this point, I had withdrawn emotionally, physically, and socially. But I needed one final thing to drive the point home. A letter. I wrote it carefully, ensuring every word was precise. It wasn't angry or bitter, it was calm, direct, and final. Nicole. We both know that what happened between us cannot be fixed. I don't have the energy to hate you, but I can't continue pretending that I can be who I used to be with you. You've broken the trust that kept us together, and I can't rebuild that. I've spent enough time waiting for you to change, for you to realize how much I've sacrificed for us. But I can't keep pretending like I'm not losing myself in the process. I don't need you to apologize anymore. I need you to understand that I am moving on. My life no longer revolves around you. This is not about revenge. This is about me reclaiming my life and my happiness. You can keep your apologies, your regrets. I'm taking my future back. Goodbye. Jason. I slid the letter under the door to her office that night while she was in the other room. I didn't want to see her reaction, I didn't need to. She would read it and know exactly what I meant. The next day, I could feel her eyes on me as she read the letter. But I didn't flinch. I didn't engage. I was done. Step 4, a new chapter. The weeks following the letter felt like a slow, steady release of tension. I felt lighter every day, more confident. Every moment I spent away from Nicole was a victory for me. I focused entirely on myself, on my hobbies, my work, my growth. I started planning my future without her, without any of the baggage she had brought into my life. And then, one day, it hit me, I wasn't even angry anymore. I had let go. I was moving on, truly moving on. The revenge I had plotted wasn't about hurting her anymore. It was about showing myself that I could be stronger than the pain she had caused. I didn't need her to validate my worth. I had built my life, again, and this time, I was the one in control. Rachel was right. I didn't need to destroy her. I needed to rebuild myself. And in doing so, I had found my peace. It was a Saturday morning when I decided to make the drive. I had been feeling the pull to return to my father's house for a while. I hadn't seen him much since I moved out a few years ago, and I hadn't been back to visit since everything with Nicole went downhill. But something about the quiet, simple life on my father's farm seemed like the perfect place to escape for a bit. I loaded up the car with some wood, tools, and my woodworking supplies, planning to continue the project I had started. A few days away from the city, away from the reminders of Nicole and everything that had happened, seemed like exactly what I needed. The drive took a few hours, and as I neared the familiar old house, I felt a sense of calm begin to settle over me. It was funny, how much had changed, and yet how much still felt the same. My father's house was isolated, surrounded by fields and trees, with nothing but nature and the hum of the wind for company. It was the perfect place to clear my head, reconnect with myself, and focus on the woodworking that had become my anchor during the chaos of the past few months. As I pulled into the driveway, my dad was standing on the porch, his arms crossed and a welcoming grin on his face. He was the kind of man who never wasted words, straightforward, strong, and dependable. Just the kind of person I needed right now. "Jason. Long time no see," he said, walking down the steps to meet me. "You look like you've been working hard." I smiled. "Yeah, in more ways than one." "How've you been?" "Good. Busy, as usual. But it's always good to see you, son. You brought your tools, huh? Got some projects for me?" "Yeah, I've got a few things to work on," I said, grabbing the tools from the back of the car. I didn't tell him everything that had happened yet, but I could see the concern in his eyes. He knew something was off. We spent the next few hours chatting, catching up, and making small repairs around the property. It felt good to be in this space, away from the emotional mess I had been dealing with. But more than that, I needed to get back into the rhythm of creating something. I wasn't just building furniture anymore, I was building my peace. That evening, after a dinner of grilled steaks and potatoes, my dad sat me down on the porch with a beer in hand. "So, what's going on, son?" he asked, his voice gentle but direct. "You don't just come out here to get away from the city for no reason. What's really going on?" I hesitated for a moment, but there was no point in lying. My dad could always tell when something was wrong. "Nicole," I said, feeling the weight of her name on my tongue. She cheated on me. With some guy named Mark. It's been rough, but I'm getting through it." My dad didn't say anything for a moment. He just took a long sip of his beer and looked out at the field. "You've got a lot of heart, Jason. A lot more than you know. But you're gonna need to be strong to get through this. The good news is, you've got the tools to do it. You've always been good with your hands. Focus on that. Focus on the things that matter to you." The words felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders. I had heard them before, many times, but hearing my father say them now, in this quiet, serene place, made everything seem possible again. It wasn't about fixing everything in one go, it was about starting small. One day, one piece of furniture, one step forward at a time. The next morning, I set up my woodworking tools in the barn. The sun was shining through the windows, and the smell of fresh wood filled the air. My dad was out tending to the farm, so I had the place to myself. I started working on a new project, a custom chair that I planned to keep for myself. Something that would symbolize my new beginning, my strength, my ability to move on. As the hours passed, the rhythm of cutting, sanding, and shaping the wood became meditative. With each stroke, I was letting go of the past, piece by piece. I didn't know how long I would be staying at my dad's place, but I didn't care. For the first time in a while, I felt a sense of clarity. I was in control, building something with my own hands. It was a feeling I had missed. It was a feeling that reminded me of who I was before all the mess. That night, after dinner, my dad and I sat on the porch again. He glanced over at me, eyes narrowing in thought. "So, what's your plan now?" he asked, his voice more serious. "You gonna go back to her? Or are you gonna keep moving forward?" I knew what he meant. He wasn't asking about forgiveness or closure. He was asking whether I was ready to leave it all behind, to let go and start fresh. I thought about the last few months, the pain, the betrayal, and all the confusion. Then I thought about the chair I was building in the barn. I realized that it wasn't just a piece of furniture, it was a symbol of the future I was choosing for myself. "I'm not going back," I said firmly. "I'm moving forward. I'm focusing on what makes me whole. And right now, that's woodworking. It's building my life again, piece by piece." My dad smiled, his face full of pride. "That's my boy," he said with a grunt. "You've got the right idea." As the days passed, I continued to work on my furniture, each piece becoming more and more important. The chair I was crafting started to take shape, and so did my future. I didn't know exactly what was next, but I knew this was the right path. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about making Nicole regret what she did. It was about me, about becoming the person I was always meant to be, with or without her. And for the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. The pieces were coming together, and I was finally building something that would last. A few weeks passed, and the routine I had fallen into at my dad's place began to feel like a new normal. The mornings were spent in the workshop, the afternoons in quiet contemplation, and the evenings on the porch with my dad, talking about everything and nothing. It was the kind of peace I hadn't realized I was craving. The chair I had started working on had slowly taken shape, and with each cut, each movement of the sander, I felt more in control. But more than that, it was the steady rhythm of working with wood that was grounding me. It allowed me to process everything without feeling overwhelmed, a form of therapy I hadn't expected. But one afternoon, while I was in the middle of sanding down the armrest of the chair, I received a phone call. It was from Nicole. I had been waiting for this moment. Part of me had been expecting it. She hadn't reached out in weeks, and I'd felt a sense of finality in the air. But that didn't stop my stomach from lurching when I saw her name on the screen. I hesitated, but eventually, I answered. "Nicole." "Jason," she said, her voice soft but shaky. "I know you don't want to talk to me, but I need to. I need you to hear me out." I felt my anger stir, but I kept my voice steady. "I'm listening. I've been thinking about everything. About what I did. And I can't live with the guilt anymore," she said, her words rushing out like she had rehearsed them over and over. "I've made so many mistakes, Jason. I can't undo what happened, but I'm sorry. I want to make things right. Please, don't shut me out. I'm willing to do anything." I stood there, holding the phone to my ear, but I wasn't listening to her. Not really. I wasn't even sure if I wanted to hear what she had to say. I could feel the anger rising again, but this time it was different. This time, it wasn't just about what she had done, it was about me realizing that I had already let go. I had already moved on. I looked over at the chair in the workshop, the one I had been building for weeks. It was a symbol of my strength, a reminder that I was choosing my own path. I wasn't tied to her anymore. And I wasn't going to let her drag me back into that mess. "Nicole, I'm not going back," I said firmly. "You had your chance. I'm done." There was silence on the other end of the line, but I could hear her breathing heavily. "Jason, please. I love you. I'm not asking for you to forgive me. I just want a chance to fix what's broken. You've been my whole world, and I don't know what I'll do without you. I felt a pang in my chest, but it wasn't because I wanted her back. It was because I knew, deep down, that she hadn't changed. She was still trying to control the narrative, still trying to make me feel guilty for choosing myself. I'm not your fixer, Nicole, I said, my voice unwavering. And I'm not going to be the one who gets dragged into this again. I'm rebuilding my life, and that doesn't include you. It's time for both of us to move on. You should do the same. I ended the call before she could say anything else. It was the hardest thing I had ever done, but I knew it was the right choice. I wasn't going to let her come back into my life and tear down everything I had worked so hard to rebuild. The next few days were a turning point for me. I started working even harder on my woodworking. I spent long hours in the workshop, sanding, shaping, and perfecting each piece of furniture I made. Every motion felt purposeful. I wasn't just building things, I was building my future. And I was doing it without Nicole. One afternoon, as I sat in the barn, looking at the chair I had nearly finished, I realized something. The chair wasn't just a symbol of my strength, it was a reminder that I could stand on my own, no matter how hard life had been. It wasn't perfect, but neither was I. And that was okay. My dad came in to check on me later that evening, leaning against the doorframe as he watched me finish the last touches on the chair. "You done with that piece of furniture?" he asked, his voice low. I nodded, stepping back and admiring the chair. "Yeah, it's finished. You know," he said with a thoughtful pause, "sometimes, you build something not just for yourself, but for everyone around you. Maybe this is the beginning of something bigger for you, son." I looked at him and smiled, a small weight lifting from my chest. "Yeah, I think it is." The next morning, I packed up the chair and put it in the back of my car. I wasn't sure what the future held, but I was done letting the past control me. I had rebuilt my life piece by piece, and I was ready to take that first step into whatever was next. Nicole had left a mark on me, yes. But I was no longer defined by her. I was defined by my own strength, my own choices. And that was all I needed. It was late one evening when I finally made the decision. I had spent the last few months rebuilding my life in so many ways, emotionally, mentally, and physically. The more I worked on my woodworking, the clearer it became, this was where my heart was. I wasn't just doing it to escape the pain of the past. I was doing it because it made me feel alive, like I was truly creating something that meant something. I was good at my tech job, don't get me wrong, but every day felt like I was running on autopilot, pushing through the motions. The satisfaction I got from it was fleeting. But when I was building furniture, when I was cutting, sanding, and shaping, it felt like I was part of something bigger. I felt grounded, focused, and connected to something that truly mattered to me. That night, as I sat in my small apartment, looking over the projects I had worked on over the past few months, I knew what I had to do. I was done living a life that wasn't truly mine. I had spent so much time focusing on others, on fixing things that were broken, but now it was time to focus on me. I picked up the phone, called my boss, and told him what I had been thinking for a while. "I'm going to resign," I said. "I've thought about this a lot, and I've realized it's time for me to do something that makes me truly happy. I'm going to pursue woodworking full-time." There was a moment of silence before he spoke. "Jason, are you sure about this? You're giving up a solid career for..." "I'm sure," I said, cutting him off. "I've thought this through. I can't keep doing something that doesn't fulfill me. I need to follow my passion. It's time to make the leap." That was it. I had made my decision. I wasn't going to waste another day in a job that didn't excite me. I wasn't going to wait until I was too old or too stuck to change. The future was wide open, and I was ready to take it on. A week later, I found myself in the process of quitting my tech job, setting up a small woodworking business, and figuring out how to make a living doing something I truly enjoyed. It wasn't easy, there were still a lot of uncertainties, a lot of unknowns. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. I was doing something for me. I wasn't doing it for anyone else. To accompany this new chapter, I realized I wanted something more. A companion, someone who could share in the new adventure. I didn't want to be alone anymore, but not in the way I had been with Nicole. I needed something real, something loyal. So, I decided to get a dog. I had always wanted a dog. Growing up, my family had always had pets, but I had never been in a position to take care of one on my own. Now, with my new lifestyle, it felt like the right time. I went to the local shelter and found a sweet, medium-sized mutt with dark brown eyes and a goofy smile. Her name was Daisy, and as soon as I saw her, I knew she was the one. I adopted her right away, and within days, she became my shadow. She was playful, affectionate, and full of energy. She reminded me of the simple joy in life, running through the grass, chasing a ball, lying on the couch without a care in the world. Daisy was the perfect companion, and having her by my side made the new chapter in my life feel more complete. As I continued to build my woodworking business, I found that I was more fulfilled than I had ever been. I woke up every day excited to work on new projects, to see my ideas come to life in the wood. Each piece I made, from custom tables to chairs to shelves, felt like an extension of myself. I started selling my work online, and to my surprise, there was a demand for what I was creating. Slowly but surely, my business began to grow. Daisy was always there, sitting by my side while I worked, or following me to the park for walks when I needed a break. She brought me a kind of peace I hadn't known I needed. I couldn't say that I had all the answers, or that my life was perfect, but I was finally living authentically. I wasn't defined by my past or the betrayal I had gone through. I wasn't waiting for anyone else to complete me. I had found joy in my work, in my freedom, and in my loyal companion. A year later, my business had grown steadily, and I had more clients than I had ever expected. I had created a life that was uniquely my own. I had found my happiness, my peace, and my independence. And most importantly, I had learned to never again settle for a life that didn't fulfill me. It wasn't easy. There were days of doubt, days when I questioned my decision to leave behind a steady career, but those moments were few and far between now. The life I had built was my own, and it was everything I needed. Daisy and I took a walk every evening, just before the sun set. The air was crisp, the streets quiet, and as I looked at her, I knew that I had made the right choice. She had become my family, and together, we had built a life filled with purpose, passion, and happiness. And for the first time in a long time, I was truly content. I had left the past behind and built something that would last, both in my work and in my heart.